Hey guys, welcome to Catholic in America. Today we are joined by Jason Evert, who is the author of Male, Female, Other, a Catholic Guide to Understanding Gender. We're going to talk about the transgender movements, the struggle that people with gender dysphoria are facing, and how we can be Christ to them and speak the truth with love. So stick around. Hey guys, welcome to Catholic in America. I'm Father Michael Nixon, and today we are very blessed to be joined by Jason Evert, who is the author of many books, including his latest book, which I have here, Male, Female, Other, a Catholic Guide to Understanding Gender. And Jason, it's so good to have you on the show.
Well, thank you for having me on. Looking forward to it.
And so for those familiar with your work, I know you've been in speaking in areas of chastity and about what it means to be human, about dating. And you and your wife, I know, have done a lot of just fantastic work in those areas. What kind of opened up the doors for you to begin to ask this question and begin to look into the concept of gender, the transgender movements, kind of those ideologies behind gender studies? What kind of first brought that up for you to seriously consider this and then write a book about it?
Yeah, well, we speak to about 100,000 kids a year and have been doing that for the last 25 years. And just, especially in the last 5 years or so, things have just kind of taken a hockey stick acceleration in terms of this topic in particular, where after the talk, the kids are coming up afterwards and asking, well, what about this? And, I identify as non-binary, or my friend says she's trans, and, what do I say, or what do I do? Or my kid is wrestling with this, and, my daughter wants top surgery. What do we do? The teacher's saying, hey, we've got a boy that wants to go in this path. So all these things are coming to the surface, but everyone is scrambling for answers. So I thought, okay, I'll write a book on it because I've got years of experience talking to these young people. So I'll read 15 or 20 books, then I'll have a handle on it and I'll write my own. I got through like 15 or 20 books and I was like, I haven't even scratched the surface here. I need to read 5 more on endocrinology, 5 more on pediatric medicine, 5 more on psychology, anthropology, Marxism, feminism. And, by the time it was all said and done, I was about 20,000 pages deep into the literature and felt, okay, I feel like I'm at a point now where I could adequately say something to kind of hand to the church and the people in the world that something that can address these questions of whether you're struggling with gender dysphoria, your child, your student is, how we can address this with charity as well as clarity.
And I think that's definitely what comes across in the work that I've seen from you is the reality of being able to meet people with compassion, being able to meet people with love. And obviously, stepping into environments of for years talking about chastity to high schoolers and to people, having those sort of conversations that maybe parents or pastors wish they could have had or didn't feel they were equipped to have. Did that prepare you for this to kind of begin to learn to hear people's struggles with compassion so that you can answer it with the gospel without just kind of dismissing them as being bad or evil for even asking the question?
Yeah, there's a temptation, especially among Christians, to take one of two approaches with this. It's either basically dismissing it or just debating it, where it's like, oh, trans woman, non-binary, gender fluid, what is this nonsense? It's either XX or XY, it's all there is to it. And if that's our only disposition towards this topic, then those who actually sincerely wrestle with gender dysphoria will just assume, okay, the church has got nothing for me but condemnation. And so instead of just being the mouth of Christ, I think we need to begin by being his ears. So after I give these high school talks, I'll just tell the kids, hey, if you guys need to hang out and talk afterwards, I'll be over there to listen. I gave that invitation to high school in New York, and the students formed a line 7 hours long. And so, we're there till 5:30 at night just listening. And so I think after 25 years of listening to people, you learn how much more important that is than just giving them lecture after lecture. And so for me, that's where I learn the most is listening, and just kind of asking the right questions. When did you start feeling this? And tell me more about that. Because if they think that all the church has, as I said, is a condemnation or a really airtight argument, well, that's not what they're looking for right now. And so we've got to learn it's not just accepting them or abandoning them. We can actually accompany them, walking with them in truth and in love.
And I think maybe that's something it's messy. It's messy to do that. It's difficult to if someone is we're not used to as a society or as a church or just as individuals to have someone that I can fundamentally disagree with something that they're doing or direction that they're taking, and yet still love them, and how to balance those two things out. So maybe you can share, have you seen any good examples of that? We can get into kind of like the individual experience, maybe zoom out a little bit as far as sort of the gender affirming care and gender ideologies that are out there. But have you had any experiences as you begun to now written a book about gender, but also beginning to talk to a lot of teens? You have been speaking to so many teens and families. Like a good example of this, of someone who was accompanied well through their questions, through these circumstances and situations that are really challenging.
Yeah, I had read of one young woman. Her name was Claire. She lived up in the Pacific Northwest and kind of came to her parents, Mom, Dad, I'm trans and I want a top surgery. And they were obviously taken back, but they said, okay, honey, well, we're going to look into this. And obviously this is a really big decision, so give us some time. And they started doing some research. Everything online said, well, if your kid says she's trans, go with it or she'll commit suicide. Didn't sit real well with the parents. The mom was a pharmacologist. The dad was well educated. So they said, look, honey, here's the deal. We're going to look into this, but in the meantime, no more YouTube, no more Tumblr, no more Instagram. We're going to go camping. We're going to start having family dinners again. And they really kind of bought themselves some time while they researched this thing a bit more. And eventually she switched schools. And in her new school, she found a circle of friends that was different than the other one. In the first school, if you were a girl, you had to kind of fit into this really rigid box of what a girl needs to look like and do and be interested in. And she didn't fit in there at all. But then when she got to her new school, she found a whole new set of friends that didn't fit the stereotypical norm for girls, but were at home in a female body. And she desisted. She was able to let go of this and realize, I guess the solution isn't to surgically or hormonally alter my body. The solution is to realize that there's different ways to be a woman, that a woman is not a person with a female personality in any body, but a person with a female body and any personality. And so typically 80 to 95% of the time, this is what happens. Children with gender dysphoria will desist as puberty goes on. The problem is when you've got specialists jumping in, said, oh, you don't feel at home in your body? I got the diagnosis. You're trans. The solution? Transition, puberty blockers, cross-sex hormone surgery. Then you're going to feel at home in your own body. And so as long as that doesn't jump in and intervene, it resolves on its own close to 90% of the time.
So for the person that comes to you and kind of comes to a parent or a counselor or a youth minister and maybe asks that question or brings that up, that I think I'm trans, I think I'm was assigned the wrong gender at birth, all the different kind of language that's used. What's maybe a good place to start there? Because I think starting with the person is really important before we sort of zoom out towards the ideologies behind that are driving this.
Yeah, I heard one evangelical pastor, and he said, look, if someone in your congregation comes to you and says, hey, I'm trans or I'm non-binary, he said, here's what you say. You say, like, I feel like I'm meeting you in chapter 8 of your life, but I haven't had the opportunity to learn about chapters 1 through 7, but I'd really like to. Can we go have coffee? That's the response. The response is, well, let me just disprove you this argument. It's like, no, tell me more. Thank you for telling me that. I'm sure that was probably hard to tell me because you were probably afraid that I would, make fun of you or reject you or dismiss you or tell you it's just a phase and you got to get over it and convert and God's angry at you. I'm not going to say those things to you. Tell me more. When did this start happening in your life? What triggers the dysphoria? Is it when you're having to dress in a particular way, act in a particular way? Tell me more about this. And so we've got to take on that listening ear. And, what do you mean by that phrase? I'm not sure I understand what that means. I'm sorry, these words are kind of new for me. Can you walk me through that? That's what they're looking for. They're not looking for a walking Google that has a perfect answer to everything. They want to find someone that'll actually discover the truth with them. And this doesn't mean we just make up the truth. It doesn't mean we just go along with whatever they say. Well, if she believes it, that's what it is. I want to build this foundation of love so that we can lovingly challenge them on some of these points. That, do you think that maybe you weren't necessarily born in the wrong body? Like maybe you were born into the wrong culture, like a culture that's telling you have to hurt your body in order to be your authentic self. Maybe there's other ways to express your femininity than fitting into that narrow stereotype. But obviously you don't start by trying to win the argument. You start by letting them know that they're heard and that they're loved. And it's kind of like you hold on to one hand of theirs with yours, and then you hold on to the other hand with reality, and you don't let go of either hand.
That has to be, just one of those things that's so rare. And maybe it's one of the reasons why this is growing at such an exponential rate is that, in a sense, our society has moved to a place where where you can't challenge people, you can't have difficult conversations. So it just becomes the two extremes that you sort of mentioned. So how much do you think that, as you're kind of looking at our society, and again, society is such a broad term, but where it makes it that much harder to have these conversations, but that much more important for people of faith to be able to have these conversations and to be a place where people can actually be accompanied rather than just like, which side are you on? Because that's obviously the very people who most need to hear the gospel can oftentimes feel the one, that they're the ones who the gospel has nothing to say to them, or that they can't be heard within church. And so people who might identify as trans or are asking those questions, they won't go to church, or they won't have those conversations with anyone who might challenge them.
Yeah, and I think the media really fuels a lot of this identity politics stuff. I read a book on the subject, and the author pointed out that the reason why so many people in the trans community have almost an anaphylactic reaction if you challenge them on any of these points of just like, this is like genocide, this is violence, this is hate. Mm-hmm. It's like, no, I don't hate you at all. I just disagree with you respectfully. Why do they have this anaphylactic reaction? And she pointed out that for them, it feels like you're not just questioning their ideology. For them, this is their identity, their community, and their mission. And it feels like you're trying to strip all of that away from them because I really wondered in life, why don't I fit in with these other people? And then I got online and I discovered these terms of non-binary or transmasculine or this or that. And I feel like I found my identity in that. And then I also discovered this community who told me that I'm brave and I can be who I want to be. And they love me for who I am with all my quirks and, inadequacies and whatever. They accept me. And also now we have a mission together as a victimized minority, and we can march forward for our rights. And so all of a sudden, these very deep fundamental human needs of community, identity, and mission are met in the transgender ideology. And so if you question that, you're pulling the rug out on all of these things for them. And so that's why you're getting this anaphylactic reaction if you're not using their preferred pronoun. Again, it draws us back to the importance of they're not going to have much of a dialogue with you unless they understand that you truly love them. And that takes time to build. It's not just about winning an argument. Winning a soul takes a little bit more investment of our hearts.
I thought that as I was reading just the opening chapters of your book, just like your love for people who are asking these questions and struggling with this reality really came through. And I think just as a testimony of you as a disciple of Jesus, that because then you go into the very, all the 18 most asked questions about this or most, not even questions, but kind of statements about, kind of around in and around the transgender ideology. And you confront them with the same charity, but also with the truth too about what the gospel teaches, which again, so just a word of gratitude for you for modeling that within the book, because I know the tendency to try to just slam dunk on people is very strong.
Yeah, well, I owe thanks to the people who helped me edit the book. I didn't just send it off to endocrinologists and philosophers and theologians and specialists in pediatric medicine and psychology. I also sent it to some individuals who identify as trans or who struggle with gender dysphoria but haven't come public identifying as trans, and sent them the manuscript and said, hey, can you really look at this? How is this landing on your heart? Am I misrepresenting the position in any ways? And literally received hundreds upon hundreds of, constructive criticism feedback. Hey, I think this needs to be nuanced a little differently and this and that. And I was able to integrate those comments. And obviously some I couldn't integrate because it would be contrary to what I believe in the church teaches, but was able to nuance it more carefully because they had the kindness to help me realizing, hey, this is going to come into the hands of a lot of families who might have children wrestling with this, or people themselves struggling with it. And I want to make sure that it's landing softly on their heart. And, at a point, it'll come to a point of tension because we're not always going to see eye to eye. Right. But I think if you do speak up, people may very well resent you for that. But I really believe that if you don't speak up on this with love and with clarity, you're going to be resented so much more 10 years from now when perhaps things change in their life and then they realize maybe it wasn't the best decision to sterilize myself with cross-sex hormones after puberty blockers and getting this surgery. Where were you when I went through all this thing? All you did was just pat me along. Like, you never lovingly challenged any of my transgender beliefs. You just told told me to just go run with it. Where were the people that loved me enough to speak the truth to me? And I think we've got to be willing to put up with some people resenting us now, because otherwise I think they're going to resent us a heck of a lot more down the road. Because when you look at what's going on with transitioners on Reddit right now, Reddit has, I think it's last time I checked, 48.1 thousand people identifying as detransitioners there, screaming from the rooftops to hit the brakes that is not the right approach. And so I think there's going to be a tsunami of them that come in the coming years, and God willing, that'll turn the tide a bit.
So this kind of, because obviously there's the person, but then there's also the wave of the ideology, which finds its way into marketing, finds its way into classrooms and to entire industries and corporate offices, kind of sort of this ideology or this philosophy. So maybe kind of a thumbnail of that. And you do a beautiful job of breaking this down in the book, but of what's behind this as a philosophy, because before it becomes something mainstream, before Caitlyn Jenner becomes a magazine cover, and it sort of, without really any sort of debate, becomes like this is now something good that we should all accept. And that was just a few short years ago. It seems like 100 years ago. But yeah, what was building through the 20th and 21st century to kind of lead us to where we are?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good point. I mean, we've talked up to now in the interview mostly about the people wrestling with this. To me, they're the kind of the casualties of the culture war. They're not the culture war itself. What we're talking about here is the ideology that's being forced, for example, in Boston public schools. The Department of Education for the state of Massachusetts mandated that every kid starting in pre-K, which is 4 years old, be read books on transgenderism, starting at the age of 4 years old. And that was piped out to 480,000 kids in their grade schools. That, hey, sometimes when a baby is born, the doctor says it's a boy, it's a girl, and mommy and daddy say that. But sometimes parents and doctors get things wrong. And when that happens, it's when the baby is transgender. Like, they're reading this to 4-year-old kids.
Wow.
And so this stuff didn't just come out with Caitlyn Jenner. Who's seen as the godfather of a lot of it, although he wasn't the start, was Dr. John Money. And this was the guy who coined the phrase gender roles. That term gender doesn't even appear in the medical literature until about 1955. And he's introducing this idea that, sex is over here, but gender's over here. And gender is a social construct. And, a person could be biologically this, but by the way we raise them, they can become that. And so really started promoting this idea that gender is this fluid concept that's culturally conditioned. And so masculinity, femininity, those even aren't real things. These are just social constructs. And so the feminists kind of jumped onto this whole thing as well. And it even went beyond gender as a social construct to sex as a social construct. There aren't two sexes. Sex itself is a spectrum, but we got to go all the way back to get to the real roots of this thing and understand that the devil isn't only the enemy of our souls, he's the enemy of our human nature. And so what God has joined, he wants to rupture. So if God joins a man and a woman, he wants divorce. God joins a body and a soul, he wants death. But if God has joined your person as an identity to your body, and we can rupture that, well, then male doesn't objectively really mean anything. And if so, neither does man, neither does father, neither does priest, neither does family. Everything now is up for grabs. And so to me, the family is under attack today because it's the weapon. It's the cell of resistance to oppression. And so that's why the guns are pointed at marriage and family. It's because that's what's needed in our civilization more than anything. And so, we could spend 4.5 hours diving into the roots of this thing, even back to the early 1900s. We could talk about Marxism, contraception, all the ways that led into this. It's almost like 15 different streams flowing towards one river that's now flooded. And you could look at them one at a time, but this thing did definitely not show up in the last 5 years. That's just when Christians kind of started pulling their head out of the sand because it got thrown in their face so much.
Yeah, and maybe that's one of the challenging aspects to this. Maybe for believing Christians or Catholics who are all of a sudden shocked by where society has gone, and but maybe thinking what were some of the precursors and things that became socially acceptable for us that maybe opened the doors to this, or even where Christians or Catholics kind of began sort of accepting in their own lives that sort of opened the door for gender to now sort of become erased within this new context. I'm thinking whether it's in marriage itself as this lifelong union between a man and a woman, or the acceptance of contraception, which is relatively new in a lot of Christian circles. But just that tendency that maybe we've allowed this in by not being more intentional about the way we've lived our own faith and the way we've approached just our own bodies.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, a couple of the major ones would obviously be contraception, because contraception essentially turns women into men in the bedroom. Because essentially what happens when you're contracepting, the woman's gift of fertility is all of a sudden, she's given the reproductive rate of a male. And what I mean by that is, like, in any given species, the evolutionary biologist will point out that whatever sex has the longer reproductive rate tends to be more choosy when selecting a mate. And so for the human species, the man's reproductive rate could be all of 5 minutes. That's as much as he needs to invest in the act, technically. Whereas the woman's is, you got fertilization, gestation, lactation. It's a huge investment if you get pregnant. And that's why women historically have been more selective with who they go to bed with. But what the sociologists have found is what contraception did was give women the reproductive rates of men. And as a result, they no longer were as choosy when it came to who they were going to bed with. And so we were, in a sense, making the sexual act androgynous. Now, our sexual differences were erased in the bedroom because of contraception. Now, that led the way to same-sex marriage because, well, if a man and a man, if a man and a woman can engage in a sexual act that's intrinsically not open to human life, then why can't a man and a man engage in a sexual act that's intrinsically not open to human life? What is the male-female difference? Is there a really male-female difference? All these things, in a sense, destabilized gender. And this isn't just a conservative Christian viewpoint. I mean, Judith Butler, who's like the godmother of all feminists, said that sexual behavior has the power to destabilize gender categories. And so she saw it, and she even promoted it. And so this isn't some right-wing agenda kind of thing. It's plain as day within the feminist literature.
And I think that maybe becomes something, a recognition as well, just for how have we formed our own understanding of the body, of gender, of sex, of marriage, of intimacy, in a sense, like the importance of fatherhood, the importance of mothers. Yeah. Like, I think it's a good opportunity for us to sort of rediscover that as followers of Jesus, as disciples, as if someone is a Christian, to say how much have I been influenced and evangelized, so to speak, by the world, and what difference does it make to start to become evangelized by the gospel when it comes to these fundamental issues? Yeah,
the church is being offered right now a very teachable moment of like, what does it even mean to be human? I mean, of Matt Walsh's documentary that went viral, what is a woman? I mean, the very fact that we're even asking ourselves these questions as a culture is a sign of the times that, like, we don't even know what it means to be human. And Vatican II, in a sense, prophesied this. It said that when God is forgotten, the creature itself grows unintelligible, meaning that if as a culture we lose sight of supernatural realities, it'll actually come to the point where we can't even see natural realities, such as male and female. Everything becomes obscured. And so we're given this opportunity to rediscover what it means to be human. What does it mean? Like, I have a body. Is my body meaningless, or is my body meaningful? Does my body reveal the person, or do my feelings reveal my identity? And so we're being given an opportunity to rediscover what it means to be human, what a family means, what marriage means. And so we've got to be able to stand up boldly and clearly articulate the teachings of what the church has offered for 2,000 years, instead of thinking, I'm some hateful, transphobic bigot if I don't buy a can of Bud Light, shop at Target, and toe the party line.
So I think one of maybe the most important and consequential teachings in this area, someone I know that you've written a lot about and love, and I do as well, is St. John Paul II has his Theology of the Body. And I think even those words now as the hockey curve of the trans ideology, like, certain fundamental aspects of saying theology, the study of God and the body, which is this reality, are kind of now called into question. So how does that teaching of the theology of the body really give us a lens or an approach to this that maybe people haven't had before?
What the theology of the body really is an adequate anthropology of what it means to be human, where he kind of points out there that the human body is the only creation of God that makes a person visible. And so animals have bodies, but they're not a personal being. Angels are personal beings, but they don't have a body. And so the human body alone makes visible this invisible mystery of personhood. And so my body isn't something I just have, like I have a pair of jeans. My body is me. So if I say, I'm going to the store, well, my body's probably going to the store as well. I mean, these things tend to go hand in hand. But the challenge with gender ideology and gender theory is that if we unhinge our identity, we detach it and unmoor it from the body, well, then it has to attach somewhere. Where is it going to anchor our identity? If not the body, it'll anchor onto a personality. But there are as many personalities as there are persons, and you will literally end up with an endless list of genders. And to me, that's the end game. Not to have 58 genders. The end game is for gender to essentially be meaningless. It's just an erasing of the sexual difference, erasing what John Paul called the spousal meaning of the body, that our body reveals that we are created to make a gift of ourselves and life-giving love, and by doing so, we reflect the Blessed Trinity itself on earth. Gender theory is the inversion of that. Your body reveals nothing. It doesn't reveal your identity. It doesn't reveal your calling. You determine who you are. You become the creator of yourself and determine your own destiny. And so it's an inversion, in a sense, of the whole spousal meaning of the body.
That spousal meaning of the body, the fact that we're created male and female, that in my body created male, that it makes sense in light of the other. That goes all the way back to Adam and Eve and throughout created history, obviously. How has even beginning to help people to see the goodness of their body, how does that, the goodness of the fact that they're created male or female, how does that help to begin to disarm maybe some of these aspects that God planned and willed for you to be created male, to be a boy, to have have those conversations, and whether it's with children or with teenagers or just within marriage, just the goodness of the body is really what's at stake here too, because in a sense now it becomes this sort of superfluous and even something that I need to destroy or tear apart in order to find my true self.
Yeah, it's an affirmation ultimately. It's a good news. What the gospel is, that your body is good. You are good. You don't have to hurt yourself to be your authentic self. And so when you start really looking into what these drugs and chemicals and surgeries do, I mean, it's heartbreaking. I mean, the kids are getting put, I was talking to a nurse at one of these gender clinics, and they were putting kids on puberty blockers at 8 years of age. And then they transition them over to cross-sex hormones, and then the girl's on testosterone. Her risk of heart disease is now quadrupled because of this. Then they go on to get the surgeries and sterilization for life, and they never breastfeed their children. If a guy gets what's called an orchiectomy, which is essentially like a castration, I mean, he'll never have children. His children will never have children. I mean, you're literally wiping out generations of human beings that will never stand before the face of God for all eternity with this promise of you're being your most authentic self. This culture is not giving them permission to accept themselves. It's giving them permission to reject themselves. And so what the church is stepping in is not rejecting, but actually affirming their sexual identity instead of going with them down this path of rejecting what God has given them in their sexuality.
That's such a key part of this, that like the gospel's fundamental, it's what fundamentally it's what we're for. Obviously we're against untruth, we're against lies, we're against the lies of the enemy, death. We're for life, we're for the person, for the integrity of the body, for men and women. And part of this too is maybe the attack on women. And maybe you could say a word about that, because I think that that's something in a particular way that we've seen violence against women and violence against women's bodies, particularly when it makes them different from men. As we've seen, there's been horrible manifestations of that throughout human history. Yeah. And we think about, female genital mutilation is one of the ways, that the international community in places has decried that as this attack on women and their bodies. But how has this particularly been an attack on women and what it means to be a woman that is something that we as Christians with the Christian anthropology need to stand up against and stand for their rights and their dignity?
Yeah, you think of even from the beginning, I will put enmity between you and the woman and between your seed and her seed, that there's going to be this enmity between the devil and woman. And you see that, with sex trafficking, with abortion, with rape, with all this stuff going on, but particularly in gender theory. Typically, gender dysphoria historically has been affected young boys and middle-aged men. But after social media came into the picture, there was this complete inversion of the sex ratio and a skyrocketing of young girls who don't identify as girls anymore. And it's not necessarily that they're wanting to identify as boys. Many of them are finding a place kind of in between as non-binary, that they're having these top surgeries, which are being given to kids as young as 12 years old in Oakland, California. I mean, in Oregon, a girl can get a double mastectomy without her parents' permission at the age of 15, but she can't use a tanning bed till she's 18, can't get a tattoo till she's like 21 years old, but can sever both of her breasts off because she doesn't think she's a girl. And where are they going to get the money for it? Well, it's like $10,000 a surgery. They're going to places like GoFundMe.com. Like, hey, donate to my procedure so I can be my authentic self. And there's more than 40,000 girls on GoFundMe right now raising money to have a double mastectomy so they can be their quote-unquote authentic self, having a gender-affirming mastectomy, a gender-affirming hysterectomy. It's, as Ryan Anderson pointed out, it's like this Orwellian misuse of our language, inverting what these words actually mean. So there's definitely an attack on women. I mean, women's sports, women's prisons, women's bathrooms. I mean, Kansas City Airport just opened up, a couple months ago. You walk in past security, and you see a toilet icon. You're like, oh, there's the bathroom. You walk in, it's like, is this male, female? And once you're in, then it shows all gender restroom, 38 stalls available. And you're like, wait a minute. And then there's men washing their hands next to women at the sink. Women are coming out of stalls and men going into the same stalls. It's like, whoa. I mean, if you want your gender-only bathroom, you got to go walk to the end of the terminal to get to that one that has like 6 stalls. And so it's I just feel like what a violation to women that they can't even have their privacy to put their makeup on anymore. And obviously, it's a hot topic. I mean, I was speaking just this weekend in Louisiana, and as soon as I got off the airport, I walk into the bathroom, it's a men's bathroom. As soon as I walk in, I see, a person in a mini skirt with high heels doing their makeup in the mirror, and I immediately just stop. Oh, wait, did I walk into the women's room? But I looked, I'm like, no, this is the men's room, and sure enough, it was a man, and identifying as a woman, and I went into the restroom and came out, and as I was leaving, I heard some guy make fun of the individual. Of like, oh, I thought I was in the wrong bathroom. And I thought that, but I'm not going to say it out loud to hurt that person. And I looked for the person afterwards, and I couldn't find him. I wanted to apologize to that individual for what he had suffered. But yeah, I mean, they're coming after the women, because who's going to stand up for women's rights in the trans movement? Is it going to be the men who want to be women or the women who don't? The answer is neither. And that's why the world needs to stand up. That's why it's such a blessing to people like Riley Gaines and Chloe Cole, who's a detransitioner, that are really speaking out about this stuff, not only in sports, but in public policy, medicine, education, and so on.
So for us who are maybe just beginning to even wrestle with this thought, like, well, that's just some left-wing thing, or out in some other part of the country, and that doesn't affect us or impact us, or doesn't impact my family or my church. How can we start to maybe be proactive in having these conversations and not just waiting for someone that we care about to drop a bombshell on us, or to say that they're a different gender, or say just maybe do something that we're not unequipped for, and we haven't been having these conversations ahead of time. Just like, what's some practical ways we can exercise our mind and heart in loving people well, but also speaking the truth?
Well, one, pray. Pray for people that are going through this. Pray for families that are going through this, because it's obvious a lot of stress on everybody in the family, not only the person wrestling with gender dysphoria, but the parents. The mom was like, I always envisioned my son's wedding one day and having little grandkids, and now my son's transitioning to a woman and going to have a surgery, and I'll never have my grandkids. Like, there's a lot of trauma in the family. Pray for these families. Intercede and fast, rosaries, masses, whatever you do, pray. Also, odds are, if you don't know already somebody going through this, you're going to know somebody soon, whether it's your niece coming out or a student in the confirmation class or whoever. You've got to be able to first treat them as human beings instead of just trying to debate them out of this, as we has talked about. So you got to get educated on this as well. Like, if you fall in love with someone who speaks a different language, you'll learn the language and you'll have more to connect with them on. And so this whole language is new for a lot of us. So wait, trans woman, is that a woman who says they're a man? man or a man who's, what does that word mean? Like, let's start to familiarize ourselves with these terms. You could get the book I did, Male, Female, Other. Our website is chastity.com. And if you go to chastity.com/gender, that's where we house just one page with all the resources we're finding. The podcast, the medical literature, advocacy groups from a legal perspective, schools and churches, policies that they can use, just support groups for parents, individuals, counseling, therapists, all of that we put at chastity.com/gender. So do your homework, learn about this stuff, and then make sure that when you do encounter somebody who's going through this, they walk away from your first conversation feeling like, I feel heard. I feel like the church has ears and not just a mouth. I feel like maybe I could find a home in a pew at that church. Maybe I don't have to get everything figured out and then I can go to church. Maybe there'll actually be Christians that will walk with me even though I don't have all this stuff figured out.
That's such a gift. And I think too, that's how we live in a Christ-like way, that Jesus walks with us, even though though he obviously doesn't agree with everything we do, but then he's leading us towards the truth. He's leading us towards life. He's leading us away from sin, but also the lies of the devil to become more ourselves. And I think that's always the thing I try to share with people just from my own story too, is as a sinner saved by grace, that every time I've encountered something that challenged me in the gospel and decided to live for that and decided to change it's been better. And I think even that simple thing of like, I want the fullness of life, and I want that for myself, but for everybody else as well. And so maybe just inviting people to consider that as being able to come to grips with your own testimony of conversion and of following Jesus, and how it's been better for you, as difficult as it might be. Maybe there's areas where you needed to change and need to be to change your thinking or to grow and deepen. As hard as it is, it's better to follow Jesus and to live the truth that he invites us into.
Absolutely. And you think of how he would have handled this subject. I mean, he would have been having dinner with these individuals. He's not treating them like, even the way he treated lepers was with love, but we can't treat them like lepers. They're just like, they have that condition, that thing, I can't go near them. It's like, no, that's not the approach that Christ would have had. And obviously, as parents, you have a responsibility first and foremost to your own children. They deserve their time of latency and innocence and not to be bombarded with cultural questions that, are too much for them right now. But the challenge is you can't go far into culture without this getting thrown in your face. Man, I went to a Phoenix Suns basketball game. Cheerleaders ran out onto the court, which is enough of a problem. But then one of them was a guy, not like some buff guy throwing up the cheerleader. No, a guy dressed like all of the girls doing all the girl moves. And my little boys saw it and they're like, like they thought it was a parody. And they didn't realize, no, they're like, Dad, what is going on there? That guy's seriously dancing like the girls, and he's dressed like the girls. What is going on? I was like, okay, we'll talk on the way home, but I really hadn't planned on having a conversation about gender dysphoria with my 7-year-old to a basketball game, but had a talk about how to look at these individuals with love and with respect and with compassion as Christ would have treated them. And so that's our call. It's not like we're better than them because we don't wrestle with that particular thing. I got my own issues, and who knows, some of these individuals, I can't wait for the day that we've got canonized saints who wrestled with gender dysphoria and glorified God with their bodies, and maybe even went through full-on transition and then went through a conversion after that and then preached the gospel from the rooftops. We don't know where they're at in their journey, but we're all in need of redemption, and nobody is an exception.
Absolutely. I pray for that. I pray for that. So for yourself, as probably your most important role as a husband and a father, what's something that you're seeking, with all this research that you've been doing that maybe has made you more intentional about your approach towards family life, and leading your family towards the Lord, but also in just sharing your heart as a man with them?
Yeah, well, one recommendation I'd heard from someone is like, when you're doing bedtime prayers to the kids, thank you, Jesus, for making Joseph a boy. And, and may Joseph be a strong man one day as he grows to be like daddy. And so you're affirming their sexual identity. You're not imposing anything on them, because our sexual identity is a gift. There's a givenness to it. It's a gift from the Father. And all we're doing is affirming that. We're not affirming that they have to fit into some really rigid, stereotypical box. Like if my boy wants to do theater instead of football, well, I'm going to go sit in the auditorium and cheer for the guy. Because you think of people like John Paul II, this guy, is one of the most masculine men I'd ever met in my life, but he was deeply a lover of theater and poetry and the arts. It's because he didn't grow up in a culture that told him if he does that stuff, he's not that much of a man. He just wasn't burdened by these rigid gender stereotypes. And so we've got to be able to affirm our kids in their interests. And if they do start expressing things in a gender non-conforming way, then, be patient with that. It's like, no, you're going to wear a pink dress to church whether you like it or not. Sometimes that can exacerbate the dysphoria instead of helping it to relieve. And so maybe you might need to find a good counselor to walk through, okay, where's this kind of stuff coming from? Is it just that she's a little bit more of a tomboy and she likes doing what the boys do? Okay, she can climb a tree, she can throw a rock, she's still a girl, and so we can still affirm their sexual identity, even if they have interests that might be stereotypically in this direction or that.
That's beautiful. Well, Jason Evert is the author of Male, Female, Other, A Catholic Guide to Understanding Gender. And Jason, I'm so grateful for you taking the time, just sharing your heart with us and the important work that you're doing in these areas. I hope people will check out that book. And thank you so much for checking us out here at Catholic in America. Thank you for all those who are sharing this content, these videos, and subscribing and supporting us. We can't do it without you. And so we're praying for you, and hopefully you're praying for us. And we'll see you soon. God bless.
Thank you.
In Catholic in America, we engage the intersection between faith and culture.
Tune in every week because no topic is out of bounds.
We want to thank you so much for supporting this show by watching it, by liking, sharing, and subscribing. How else can they support the show?
You can also become a patron on Patreon and support us financially.
So if you support us, there's all kinds of swag. There's t-shirts, there's coffee mugs, or maybe bumper stickers. I don't know. Maybe we could come up with a wig from Father Tom.
Father Tom wig would go a long way. So thanks for your support. God bless y'all, and check us out next time on Catholic in America.